Hello guys and welcome to another episode of the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon podcast. My name is Michael and today we are recapping UFC 225. I'll give you a short preview of the show. We're going to talk about Robert Whittaker versus Yoel Romero. Then we're going to talk about the co-main event, Dos Anjos versus Covington. Then we're going to talk about Holm versus Megan Anderson and Curtis Blaydes versus Alistair Overeem. Just a couple of words of what I thought before the fight, and then we'll get into what happened during the fight. Obviously, Romero missed weight, and 0.2 pounds isn't that big of a deal. It's not 3 pounds or 6 pounds like we've seen before, but I guess the rules are the rules, so the fight wasn't a title fight. And the amount of weight he missed here wasn't the concern here. It was the weight cut itself. After the fact, people were reporting that he was visibly hurt and couldn't walk by himself. And that's a ridiculous scenario 36 hours before the fight. Like, you can't walk by yourself because you're so dehydrated, and then you're gonna fight the baddest man in your division. And it's the second time he missed weight, so it seems like all the years of cutting weight finally catched up. Your body just can't respond well to continuous dehydration. But anyway, the first fight was very enjoyable. It wasn't a super action-packed, fast-paced kind of a fight, but it was a beautiful display of martial arts at the highest level. Both guys went back and forth with their way of adapting to what the other fighter was showing to him. You know when people say that the fighters are playing chess when they fight? It's like a high-stake chess. Well, in their first fight, that was it. They were playing chess with very high stakes. And I felt like it was a perfect performance from Whittaker in a way of displaying his position in the division, and as a champion, he went through some adversity by getting injured during the fight and still came up on top. And Romero gave him that challenge. I know it sounds like a cliche, but their fight was literally a chess match. And I expected the rematch to be similar in that way. One guy is going to make a move in a chess match metaphor, and the other guy would respond, but not only to defend the move or to give or not to give his opponent the chance to score. The response was more than that. It was proactive, figuring out what he did and respond in a way that will move you forward towards your goal. It wasn't just attack and defend. It was all of it at all time. They were trying to figure each other out, and there were layers to it. Stylistically, what makes Whittaker so good is his footwork. It's really good, and it's the basis of what he wants to do. The angles he takes and the distance he decides to fight at is the core of his style. He can punch, he packs a punch, and he's not afraid to exchange, but with his footwork and the angles he is able to take, he oftentimes plays an outside fighter kind of game. He chooses the ways he gets in and out of the range, and the placement of his strikes very well, and also the range at which the fight takes place, like an outside fighter would. And he's fast on the feet, which also supports that. And the defensive wrestling he displays is one of the best. It reminds me of Jose Aldo's wrestling defense, or even of what he wants to do on the feet in relation to his wrestling. It's really hard to pressure Whittaker or get him on the fence, and he dictates the distance so well, and that will be one of the main things, and was one of the main things in their first fight, because of Yoel Romero being such a good wrestler and the way he uses his wrestling when he fights, which is not only to take his opponents down, but also just using it as a threat, as it played a big role when he fought Machida, who's a good outside fighter. With the pressure and the threat of the takedown, he made Machida react in ways that put Machida in bad positions and gave Romero opportunities to finish the fight. So now let's talk about what happened this Saturday. At the beginning of the fight, Romero was staying really stationary, and most people would probably think that's because of the weight cut, and he does that to conserve his energy, but that wouldn't be the best way to do it, because you just become a target. He might have been doing it to set the rhythm and then break it, because he does that really well, and he did hit Whittaker with a left hook later on. And he not only will try to make you think that nothing is happening and then explode, he also breaks the rhythm in between his attacks. And Whittaker really made sure that Yoel Romero doesn't have an easy time doing it. The low line side kick to the leg and the jab up top were weapons in stopping Yoel's potential advances. And the jab was there to make sure that there is an obstacle in Romero's way as Whittaker exits the range, just sticking it in his face. It got me thinking about the range those two want to fight at because of Whittaker being so good at dictating the range, as we talked about, and how he uses his footwork to do it. So Romero, by being stationary, it reminded me of what Woodley did, but he did it with a cage behind him, so the range was a little bit different. He was more in control of it. So Romero doing it didn't make too much sense, and he got hit with a right hand as he was just staying in front of Whittaker. So it was a good example of how Whittaker will exploit those things, those opportunities, if there are any, because of the weight cut. And you could see that there was some caution before Whittaker committed to the right hand at the beginning of the fight. He was kicking a lot because of the distance, and then he was throwing a lot of feints before he decided to get in. Those are just the things that he does well. Also, as I was watching the fight, it got me thinking how Yoel will adjust to the pace. Meaning, in the first round, it was obvious that Whittaker threw more strikes and landed more strikes, and if the fight goes to the distance, that's what's going to win you the fight. How many times did you hit the guy? And the guy who got hit more times, most likely, loses the fight. So because of Yoel not throwing a lot, it meant that he was looking for opportunities to finish the fight. And it's not like Whittaker wasn't, he was. He just goes about it in a more proactive manner, in a more process-oriented manner. What really impressed me about Whittaker was his jab and the variety in which he throws it. He can throw it an up jab, kind of from his waist. He can double it up, he can triple it. He can spring in with it. He can fake it going low and then go up top with a left hook, attacking from the same side. He can throw it and leave it in your face to blind you or to potentially stop the counter. I think that's called the hanger, when you kind of leave it on top of leave your hand on top of their shoulder. The rhythm changes of his jab, that was some really, really impressive stuff. Whittaker's corner advised him to work around the guard because Romero was covering up, but that meant that he had to get closer to him to land those hooks, and I wasn't sure if he was comfortable doing that just in the second round. So Whittaker worked the body with kicks. It was an easier target, and it will open up the head later on. On the broadcast, the commentators were saying about Romero not attempting takedowns as in their first fight, but by that time he had, I think, 8 attempts already, and that might have been because of the weight cut. From their first fight, Romero knows how hard it is to take Whittaker down, and because of the weight cut, that might have resulted in Yoel really thinking about and making sure that he picks the right time to attempt a takedown, as he might have 1.5, maybe 2 attempts per round without getting tired. So that's what I thought about it. I didn't pay too much attention to it before, but I really like Whittaker's head kick setups, and I think he landed a head kick later on in the fight. So first the kick comes chambered, which hides it, then he can throw it from different ranges, even up close or almost from the clinch. Just a little thing that I didn't notice before. At the end of the second round, Romero's eye swelled up, and it might have made him fight more urgently, but I'm not sure about that. It was more of something that he had to deal with. I don't think because of the swelling now he's going to think he has to fight more urgently or he has to finish the fight right now, because considering the volume of strikes he throws and the volume that Whittaker throws, that would indicate the same result. It would be hard for Romero to win a decision without landing more strikes, or more hurtful strikes, than Whittaker. So it just might have been something annoying to him. That's it. But on the other hand, he can see less, so maybe, I'm not sure. With things like that, you never can be sure what the guy is thinking, so there was a moment in the third round, the magical third round for Yoel Romero, when he heard Whittaker. The sequence was this. Whittaker throws a tip to the body, a front kick to the body, and as he sets his leg on the ground, he throws a jab at Romero, just to stick it in his face, to make sure that there is something when he exits the range. But instead of getting out, they exchanged instead. Then Romero lands a left hook that Whittaker blocks, and then he catches him with a clean right hand on the chin. Whittaker's hand was down, he wasn't protecting his chin, and he was standing square with his feet because of the leg being retrieved from the kick earlier. And I mean, he got clipped while standing square. That has to hurt you. You have no base for your body to absorb the hit. You don't have any base under you, so all of that force goes right to your head. And Yoel really tried to finish him. He had more success punching him in the face than taking him down, and as they were on the fence, you could see that Romero knew he burned a lot of energy and didn't get the result that he wanted. He knew that he was tired, so he did one thing that might make his opponent tired, which was punch the body. So that kind of tells you the mental state that he's in, just because you don't necessarily see a lot of body work from Romero. So after the third round, Whittaker said to his corner that his right hand was broken, and by the strike he threw in the fourth round, that would confirm it. That wasn't an issue though. Whittaker has an educated left hand, plus the kicks to the body, the long leg kick to the leg, and the head kicks were enough to keep the pace that he wanted. And he even got creative with the right elbow, which was something that his corner called for also. He took an angle and then came back with an elbow. It looked like a move from a video game. I could not do it justice by explaining it, even if I wanted to. If you guys want to replay the fight and see it for yourself, it was the fourth round with exactly 1 minute and like 10 seconds to go. And later on, that got Whittaker hurt. It seemed like being closer to Romero was the thing that got him hurt. By fighting him in closer range, that gave Romero opportunities to punch and hurt Whittaker. When the distance was longer, Whittaker was scoring with jabs and kicks and occasional hooks. But as he got closer, that was the danger range. In the fifth round, Romero was moving forward more, and I felt like being proactive is the best way to put yourself in positions when you can hurt your opponent. And Romero did that in the fifth round. He pressured, he put himself in closer range where he can hit Romero more easily, or at least he has more chances of doing that. And he did it because he dropped Whittaker again. And again, he really tried to finish him. I mean, he had more success this time in controlling him with his wrestling, but both men were really resilient and just refusing to give up their initiative. And it was a crazy fight, back and forth, technical, and a brawl at times. And Whittaker won by split decision. I do think that Yoel won 2 rounds because of the damage that he did in those rounds, so the scoring gets tricky here. If this was under the new rules, I would probably score a draw by Yoel winning the third round 10-8. I'm not sure if it was under the new rules though, so thank God I'm not the judge. The fight was incredible. Both guys showed their heart and a lot of skill. The times that Whittaker dictated and kept the range he wanted, he was scoring with kicks, jabs, and some occasional punches here and there, and in that way he was winning the fight. But when the range changed to closer range, that gave your opportunities to connect and hurt Whittaker. Yoel being more proactive, he put himself in those positions where he could connect, and if he would do it earlier, he would probably win the fight more decisively. But hey, I felt like because of him missing the weight, and even if he would win, he would not get the belt. So because of the fight being so entertaining, there's no reason to get mad about the outcome. Let's just enjoy the action. The outcome didn't change. It didn't change the champion. So I'm sure some people were upset because of the decision, but it's better to just enjoy it than get angry because it wasn't the result you hoped for. I felt like this fight is a perfect example of that. It should bring only joy, and it did for me, and I hope that it did for you as well. Let's move on to our next fight, the co-main event, Rafael Dos Anjos versus Colby Covington. Before the fight, I picked Dos Anjos to win, just to let you know. Stylistically, he's a pressure fighter with good footwork and decent defense. His wrestling and his takedowns come into play when he gets his opponents on the cage as a result of pressure. And his grappling is legit, very high level. He's a black belt for more than 10 years. On the feet, he throws a healthy amount of strikes, and if Colby decides to fight him in the way he fought Maya, just not caring if he gets punched or not, just throwing his fair amount of strikes, he's going to get hit more than when he fought Maya. I mean, the punches and even knees in the third round of the fight with Damian Maia were coming really slow, and Colby was still getting hit with them. So before the fight, I thought that these guys will not be afraid to exchange with each other, and just because of the way they like to fight. And I felt like Rafael Dos Anjos will come out on top of that because of the power, the speed, the volume, and depth of skill. I thought that they were in favor of Dos Anjos, but Colby's volume is high too, so I was interested in how that would play out. So the fight starts and both guys exchange briefly. Colby did got Dos Anjos down and then controlled him on the cage for a minute. Dos Anjos has enough skill to fight in the open. He doesn't have to necessarily pressure, and because of Colby being the aggressor, that was the approach that Dos Anjos was taking. In the clinch where Colby was trying to wrestle Dos Anjos, he has enough skill to not get just out-wrestled, and bringing it up to the clinch where he has more control was a good idea. Remember how well he did against Safin and Laurer in the clinch? And the difference was that those guys weren't trying to wrestle him. And that was the reason it was giving Rafael Dos Anjos more trouble. And here's the thing about Colby, he just fights mean. He doesn't care if he gets hit or not. And he sets a high pace. So Rafael Dos Anjos was not putting a lot of resistance, just kind of flowing since he's comfortable to fight while not pressuring. And you could see that he wasn't concerned with the pressure from Covington, at least in the beginning. He was punishing him to the body with hooks and knees as Covington was coming in. I have to admit I was a little bit surprised that that Covington was the aggressor. I thought that they would meet in the middle and exchange and sort it out in there. But that was the dynamic early in the fight, and later on you could see that RDA was turning those takedowns and bringing them up into the clinch where he used the collar tie to separate, in a similar way that Verdum did when he fought Kane. So in the first round, Colby was advancing more, but Dos Anjos did more damage with his shots, so I felt like not only he could win this round, but there was a potential of him turning it around somehow. The corner advice from Jason Perulo was to put more pressure for Rafael Dos Anjos, and I thought that that's what will happen later on as they settle. One thing that was on Colby's side was the fact that he can keep a high pace, and even if he's not super technical with his striking, because of the volume, that gave Dos Anjos some trouble. And he had a harder time settling into this kind of a fight. Colby made Dos Anjos react more than anybody else since he fought Ferguson. He just didn't let him fight his fight. And even if his strikes weren't landing, Dos Anjos was blocking a lot of them, it was working well enough to not let Dos Anjos steal the initiative. And after 2 rounds, I had some doubts about how Dos Anjos can turn it around. I mean, I knew that he could do it if he stands his ground and lets Colby know that he's going to make him pay for advancing on him, but that was a little bit questionable. I had some doubts about it. Rafael Dos Anjos was doing damage to the body and to the head. I think he caught Covington on the eyebrows, so it's not like he was getting dominated. It's just that the initiative wasn't his, it was Covington's. And the reason that Dos Anjos couldn't turn it around with his strikes is that he wasn't throwing more than Covington. He needed to invest in combinations, and that was the advice from his corner after 2 rounds. Covington's way of fighting wasn't super technical, his striking is far from that, but he didn't let Dos Anjos set his feet. He didn't let him have a moment to respond with something meaningful. The one nemesis to a pressure fighter is pressure. When you make the pressure fighter back up and not settle into his kind of fight, then he's going to have trouble getting anything going. And that's what it seemed like was the case here. The volume and the variety of strikes, Covington was throwing leg kicks, body kicks, even some head kicks, really mixing it up. And the movement, the forward movement, and just not giving a fuck if he gets hit or not, was enough to get Dos Anjos out of his game. The wrestling was interesting here too, because it's not like Dos Anjos just got out-wrestled. He got outworked. It didn't matter that Covington didn't get the takedown, because he didn't need it to get a takedown. The attempts alone made Dos Anjos work, and he kept the pace up for the majority of the fight. In the 4th round, Dos Anjos took Covington down twice. He controlled him for a while, but that was it. The other half of the round, Covington did the same thing he did earlier. And the 5th round looked pretty much the same. It wasn't a dominant decision, but it wasn't very competitive either. Like, when I was watching this fight, after 2.5 rounds, I could not say that Rafael Dos Anjos is going to win this fight for sure. Just after 2.5 rounds, I wasn't sure that he's capable of turning it around. He seemed like he underperformed a little bit. The forward movement, the pace, and the wrestling put Rafael Dos Anjos in positions where it was difficult for him to get the initiative back. And the pressure is what's going to be the precious fighter's kryptonite. And it certainly was here. Covington made Dos Anjos work, and he didn't let him have his word. And then he won the fight. It sounds weird to say, but he's the interim champion, which people who don't like him would say that it fits him because interim belts don't really mean anything. But anyway, he did a good job, and I'm sure that UFC is happy about his fight with Woodley. Not only they can promote it as champion versus champion, but also the lead up to the fight will be filled with cringy trash talk, so it might just sell a lot of tickets. I mean, I definitely wasn't expecting that result, but that's what happened, and hey, Covington did a good job. Let's move on to our next fight that I want to talk about. Curtis Blaydes versus Alistair Overeem. Before the fight, I thought that Overeem would want to stay away from close range because of the threat of the takedown, and I thought that Blaydes could have a chance of taking Overeem down if he counters his strikes with a takedown, just like he did when he fought Mark Hunt. And just like we talked about on the previous episode of the podcast. And you could see from the very beginning, that Overeem was cautious about the takedown. A couple of feints from Blaydes made him jump out of the range. So you could see that there was a concern because of the wrestling of Blaydes. There was a lot of feeling out process, but as soon as Overeem throws his first strikes, his first punch, Blaydes dives in on the takedown, kind of how I thought he would do it. On the ground, Blaydes controlled Overeem from side control, from half guard a little bit, not landing a lot of ground and pound, but he definitely won that round. And most importantly, he showed that he's capable of taking Overeem down. And that's what he's good at, so it looked very promising for him. There was a heel hook attempt at the end of the first round from Overeem, but the time ran out. Also, it would be of better use if it was used as a sweep, because when you're on the bottom, you're not in a very good position, and we've talked about it on the show previously. If you get taken down, you gotta get up. You can't just stay on the bottom and hunt for submissions, unless you're Verdum on Brian Ortega. Then you can probably do that. But other than that, that's probably not a good idea for you. Faris Zahabi was talking about how he trains his guys. When they get taken down, they have something like 60 or 90 seconds to work for a submission. And that's if it's early in the round. Later in the round, probably halfway through, the stand-up is your only good choice, because you're losing points. You're not only in a bad position in the eyes of the judges, but you're also in a vulnerable position to get punched without a lot of defensive tools. So the get up is probably the best thing you can do when you get taken down. Sure, you can win a fight by submission from the bottom, but it's like Russian roulette. So the second round starts and Overeem lands a pretty nasty knee on Blaydes' chin and then follows up with a right hand that hurts Blaydes. And Blaydes, man, he's such a good recovery artist. I think you can call him that by now. He's so good at remaining conscious, even when hurt. I know it sounds weird, but he still knows what to do when he's hurt. He's so good at knowing when he is and where his opponent is, so that he can basically grab him, because that's what his instincts are, and that's what he's good at. So then he attempted a takedown on Overeem and took him down. Although Overeem helped him there with a guillotine attempt, and then again Overeem was going for a heel hook on the ground, and I'm confident in saying that right now that it was a bad choice trying to submit your opponent where your opponent is hurt from the bottom. That's just a bad choice. If it was used as a sweep, then that would be way better, because you could reverse it and be on top of your hurt opponent. But it was not what happened. So on the feet, it was a filling out process for Blaydes, in a way of trying to figure out his options for takedowns, and it seemed like he was successful with reactive takedowns, as well as when Overeem tried to clinch up in order to stop the forward movement of Blaydes. And see, this is really smart. When you try to move forward on your opponent, he has an option to clinch you. In that way, he's entering the clinch on his own terms. He's dictating the exchange, either with a strike like a knee, or just position-wise with underhooks and overhooks, just dictating the scenario basically. And that is a very good tactic. But Blaydes knew that Overeem would want to do that from his last fight, from his previous fight with Mark Hunt. He wanted to avoid the close range in a similar way here. So Blaydes was drawing out that response so that he can get first the dips on the position up close. And in his case, it was takedown attempts. And it worked. That was some really, really smart stuff from Blaydes. You know, he knew that Overeem wanted to attempt the clinch, but he saw that and he did it first. And that was how he took Overeem down a couple of times. In the third round, Blaydes managed to hurt Overeem actually with a right hand, and Overeem was just standing there right in front of him. So then what Blaydes do? he takes him down. You can see that he's a wrestler at heart, because given a choice or even an opportunity to hurt your opponent or to finish your opponent standing, he still goes for a takedown. So it was a really smart decision, because not only he's more comfortable in taking him down and working on the ground, but it just gives him an opportunity to do what he initially wanted to do. Even if he gets another opportunity to finish his opponent standing up, he still goes for the takedown. Then from the top position, from the guard, he was able to drop some nasty elbows and knock Overeem out and win the fight. Curtis Blaydes is impressive. He's smart, he knows what he wants to do and how to get it done. He's a real threat to the heavyweight division. He just finished the number 2 guy in the world, and he did it in a very impressive fashion. I would not be surprised if they give him a title shot after Miocic fight DC, depending on what happens in that fight. I thought that Blaydes got a really big step up in competition back to back with Mark Hunt and now with Overeem, but man, he impressed once again. I like Curtis Blaydes. He did a very good job in this fight. He got clipped pretty hard, but man, the chin and the recovery on this guy. Frankie Edgar would be proud. He showed up and he impressed once again. I would not be surprised if he does some real damage in the heavyweight division. Okay, let's talk about our last fight. Holm versus Megan Anderson. So before the fight, I thought that Holly would obviously want to stay at the distance and throw her volume out there, which at times was not just accomplishing nothing really. Holly tends to just throw meaningless volume out there if she doesn't get the fight that she wants to. And the fights that she lost, 4 out of her 5 last fights were losses, came as a result of that. It's pretty safe to say right now that Holly needs a specific opponent to make her look good, if not to win the fight decisively. She either needs a Ronda Rousey that will bull rush her and make herself available for counters, or a fighter who's not proactive enough so that they fight in the middle of the cage and Holly can throw her strikes and try to set up her head kick. Other than that, fighters have figured out how to beat her. Against Shevchenko being a good counterpuncher, Shevchenko was just countering the same predictable combinations of Holm, and both Cyborg and the Randomine pressured her and countered her at will. So Megan Anderson came over from Invicta, where she was the champion at 145 pounds. And this is important. I thought that before the fight this was important because Holly is not a featherweight. She's a bantamweight. And she's a good athlete. She's strong, but her true weight is 135 pounds. Megan likes to pressure. She's tall. She has 4 inches in reach and 4 inches in height on Holly in advantage, and she's big, and she also knows what she wants to do in the clinch. So I thought that if she wants to win this fight, she will need to use her size in the clinch. Her game plan would be to pressure Holly and trap her against the cage and score some points there. Rinse and repeat until she gets a decision. She's not super fast on the feet and she can leave her head stationary, so I thought that if she gets overly aggressive, I would not be surprised if she get countered by Holly. So those were my thoughts before the fight. During the fight, you could see Megan slightly moving forward, applying pressure, and Holly wanting to counter, and then exit on an angle. Good strategy, but Megan's clinch and just her moving forward was enough to score early. She landed a big knee, so as I was watching this fight, I thought this could actually work for Anderson. But she will need to be more aggressive to make it work, because she's not super fast. And more aggression means more energy used. So I thought that she needs to be careful with her gas tank. Holly in the clinch was holding more than anything, just like she did against against Cyborg. She landed a couple of elbows, but it wasn't that much. So, and you could see her strength. Holly's really strong. She's older, but she's damn strong. The clinch wasn't a bad idea for Holly. She countered the pressure that way, and she held the position for a couple of minutes with some good head position, head pressure, and with an underhook. And I was surprised by Megan not pummeling and working for an underhook of her own, because that's what she usually does. Holly kept a good underhook and inside control on the other arm in the clinch, but she's not a great clinch fighter like, for example, Mighty Mouse, to do some real damage in there. So it was more just holding, blending 2 or 3 elbows and a couple of knees to the leg, and later on actually getting a couple of takedowns from that. So not a bad tactic by Holm. Then on the feet, Megan was back to pressure, and the point that they were meeting was when Megan was pressuring and Holly decided to counter because Megan was too close. So at that moment they would meet, and it would either end up in Holly trying to counter and move out of the way, or Megan stopping that with some strikes. And because they were so close already, Holly would attempt the clinch, and she would get it most of the times. Or on the times when she didn't get it, she ate a knee to the body and a couple of occasional strikes. So as I was watching the fight, it seemed like it would came down to how well can Megan pressure and how well can Holly deal with that. I was surprised that Holly went for takedowns because she's not a good takedown artist, but she got a couple of them. The first time she ended up in a weird position with Megan having an underhook in the far arm in the side control, and she tried to sweep her, but it didn't work. If she would hook Holly's leg and then work for a sweep, she would probably get it. So, that just shows you inexperience. It's not like a super bad decision making. It was just inexperience, so, and I think that her losing that fight is probably what's going to elevate her game and make her better. So, and the rest of the fight was pretty much the same. Megan was moving forward, but her head wasn't moving, so Holly was able to counter her at times, and Holly initiating those clinch exchanges was a good idea, because she would hold Megan there and score with 2 or 3 elbows and then exit, or taken down sometime. And that's a good tactic to counter the pressure of your opponent. I felt like Megan was just a little bit too slow to catch Holm as she tried to counter, and the depth of the skill wasn't there to draw out Holly's counter and counter that, just like Cyborg did. Holly did get a couple of takedowns. She was just controlling Megan on the ground and in the clinch. That was enough to win a decision. It showed that Megan is just not experienced enough yet. She was a little bit slower, so she wasn't able to trap Holly, and her strikes were straight, so that didn't help her either in cutting her off. So Holly would either counter her at times and get into the clinch, where she was stronger even against a bigger opponent and experienced and skilled enough to control and even get some takedowns. And on the ground, the same thing. Holly was just better than Megan at pretty much everything. I thought that Megan would be able to control the clinch just because of the size, but Holly was more skilled there, and she's really strong, and she kept a good head position and good underhooks and inside control, so she was winning those clinch exchanges. On the feet, she would move as she usually does, and the pressure wasn't that good, so she had opportunities to counter a couple of times and get into those clinch exchanges and get some takedowns. It came down to how she would be able to counter the forward movement of Anderson. It was mostly with grappling, which was surprising because, that's not what she usually does. Holly looked good, and it was a different performance because of all of the grappling. yeah, she looked good. It leaves the question though, would she be able to replicate that performance against other opponents that are more experienced than Anderson? And I just don't know if she'll be able to do that. Although she looked good, I don't know if she can do the same thing against higher level opponents. It seems like those two wins against Correa and Anderson were against opponents that are not that high level, so I don't know if she wants to remain at the top, which UFC would like that, because she did defeat Ronda Rousey and she probably still has a lot of publicity because of that, even if she lost 4 out of her 6 fights. I feel like she just might be popular enough because of that, so that she can get high competition opponents, and I'm not sure if she can just compete with them. I mean, she can win a fight if she gets a specific opponent, and when she fights high level opposition, you know, they know how to beat her, so it's just difficult to see her competing with high competition. But hey, anything is possible, and it just begs a question of where she gets from here. But regardless of that, she had a good performance, and congrats to her. Thank you guys for listening. That is all I wanted to talk about today. I hope you enjoyed me talking about it. I definitely had fun watching the fights and then talking about the fights. So if you are listening, then thank you. I appreciate you. Talk to you soon.